What's up, cursors and shepherds of Calderon? This is Ben and Ryan from Fantology here to talk about the Furies of Calderon by Jim Butcher.
Yeah, this is our first duo podcast, Ben. So
Yeah, I know. It's
so
also, yeah,
we're finally off the leash. We don't have Josh or Steven watching over us.
I know. And I think that Stephen has read this book. I think it was a while ago. So he might listen to the podcast, but I don't think that Josh will listen to this podcast since he has not read the book. So we can feel free to trash talk Josh however much we want.
Yeah. And I think Jake has also read this book
Okay.
once upon a time. But you're kind of the one who initiated this read. I read this a few years ago, and so I'm rereading this as
Yeah.
well. So what inspired you to get into this?
Yeah. So obviously we're big fans of the Dresden Files on this channel. And uh I just wanted something a bit lighter. Like on the channel we've been covering like a bit heavier books recently with like the Thorns, like King of Thorns and Prince of Thorns. And um so I want something a bit lighter. And the other things we've been covering are maybe not dark, but like are like a bit more high-minded, like the foundation and just like all these, I don't know, just like yeah, heavier, maybe headier books. And so yeah, I was a big fan of Dresden Files because of the way it just like you're able to just get sucked into it and it's just very enjoyable. And so I wanted something else that hit that same nerve. So
And do you think it did hit the same nerve as Dresden Files?
yeah, I think so. I think that it was um clear. Like I think Dresden Files, since it was written in first person, allowed you to like go on more of like a fun ride throughout each book. It was more like a just a fun romp each book. This one was had more of
Mm-hmm.
like the classical elements of fantasy in it, like with POV changes and a bit a bigger cast of characters and a bit more sweeping of changes. But um, it definitely did. It satisfies the itch in the like I didn't feel like I was going to read about somebody getting his fingers chopped off the next page or like you know what I mean. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
was a bit more enjoyable. I could kind of relax a little bit more while reading it almost.
Yeah, so this is more epic fantasy, whereas Dresden Files is urban fantasy,
Yeah,
and Dresden Files is also first person, whereas this is third person,
yeah,
and from the perspective of a few different people. So those are a few differences off the top of my head. It doesn't necessarily feel like the same author too much to me. I
yeah,
think that when because I read the Dresden Files recently, and that felt a bit more adult to me. And so my recollection of this series was that it was a bit more YA.
hmm,
And as I was reading through it again recently, Furies of Calderon certainly has a lot more adult themes that I didn't remember. So I probably wouldn't be comfortable reading this with a kid who was I don't know, younger than 16 or something like that, you know?
yeah. It definitely like it's not like explicit. I don't think it like verges on like PG-13, but I don't think it's quite R. Maybe I don't know. It's not like nearly as bad as like some of the grim dark stuff that's out there, but it
Oh,
definitely
definitely
has
not.
it does have those themes. So I can see why. Well, I guess why did you think so? I was about halfway through, and you mentioned remembering that was a bit more YA, and I kind of pushed back on that idea a little bit. Um, but then I got to the end, I was like, oh, I think I know why he was saying that was more YA. So do you remember like why you and we've also talked about on the channel that like people really like to draw like distinctions between YA and classical fantasy or epic fantasy, and in reality, things are a lot more blurred. So we're not trying to like really put this in one category, but like, why did you kind of remember it as being more YA than not?
Yeah, I don't know really. I'm trying to think of why I might have classified that in my mind. It follows Tavi, who's a younger boy, and
Mm-hmm.
it has some elements of Pokemon. The
Yeah,
Furies are in
yeah,
it. And so actually maybe this is related. So when you and I and Steven and Josh, when we went to Sanderson's lectures in college, I remember him talking about Codex Alera before I had read it. And he said that, I don't remember the exact context, maybe you do, but basically he mentioned that it's not how good an idea is, it's how well it's written. And to exemplify this point, he used this series Codex Alera, and Jim Butcher, I think, was challenged by someone, I don't know who, to write a strong book on maybe a little bit weaker ideas. And the weaker ideas that the person provided were the Lost Roman Legion and Pokemon. Maybe not necessarily weaker ideas, but like when you think of them,
Yeah,
and
like
you
two
have no idea
disparate subjects. Yeah, yeah,
how the heck do those two go together?
yeah,
And so you really see that in this series, where the culture and the society that's set up is very similar to the Romans. There's even some references, and these Furies are kind of help you control the elements, and people, I guess, they can find them out in the wilds, similar inspiration to Pokemon. So it's very interesting that it that these two ideas, Jim Butcher decided to bring these two ideas together and write a series about them.
yeah. It was definitely like a hold my beer moment by Jim Butcher. Like, oh,
Yeah,
you think I can't do this? Let me show you. But
yeah,
yeah, so
and
it's cool. I mean,
I mean, maybe the other reason I just thought is there's some similarities in my head to Percy Jackson and the
huh,
Olympians a little bit. I don't know why. Just because Percy Jackson has the Greek gods and follows a teenage boy as
mhm.
he's adventuring through life. And so I don't know. There's a number of reasons why I could have made
That kind
weird
of
jump
connection. Yeah,
this weird jump and categorized it wrongly as YA.
yeah. I guess I thought that you might have kind of thought of it as YA because I haven't read the second book, but like it's hinted that he's maybe. I don't want to do any spoilers right now, so you maybe talk about it later. But it's hinted that Tavi is gonna go like do a thing that's commonly associated with YA books in the second book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what I was maybe thinking, that maybe the rest of the series maybe seems more of a YA type thing.
Yeah,
And it also could have been, I mean, this book came out in 2004, so maybe that was like, well, you're like 16 at that time. No, 12,
I
14.
was. Yeah,
Yeah, he
uh, yeah,
14. No, hold on.
yep.
You're 12.
Oh yeah,
You're
12.
12. Oh
12.
gosh, that's embarrassing. Anyway,
We can't do
so
math.
yeah, I can't do math. So I don't know when exactly you read it, but maybe you're reading it at the time that you're reading all these other books. Yeah. So
I
I don't
read it
know.
when I was in college,
Oh, did you?
but the
Okay.
first time. So it
Okay.
probably would have been 6 years ago or so.
Okay. So we talked about, so okay, let me ask you this. Does Jim, like, do you think that if you were to compare this book to the first like three Dresden books or whatever, because I think the first three Dresden books were written before this. The first Dresden book came out in 2000. This one came out in 2004. Like, do you think that he, like Butcher, evolved a lot as an author? Or I mean, like they're different books, so it's hard to like compare exactly like quality when they're so different. But I don't know. To me, it's pretty evident that he's able to handle a larger cast of characters and a lot more moving parts in this book than he
Yeah.
attempted to at first with Dresden.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely, like you said, it's more characters, more perspectives. It's longer books as well, so
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot more details in the world building. And I can say that I like this more reading. I like the first book of Codex Alera a lot more than the first three books of the Dresden Files.
Yeah.
So I would say that, at least for me, he has made progress as a writer.
Yeah. And it's interesting because with the Dresden Files, I mean, we're not going to spoil too much there, but like he goes on to develop a large cast of characters, but still, I mean, even up to like book 10 or 11 or 12, they're still like in each novel, they're treating the cast of characters pretty distinctly, right? Like normally he only covers kind of one cast of characters at one set. Like he's either like with the vampires or with the fae or with the, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's interesting that, I mean, even though he's still developed a lot more as an author, the Dresden Files still tries to kind of like keep all like in each novel, keep the cast of characters pretty small. That has started to kind of change with Battleground. But I mean, still, that's still kind of like the theme of Dresden Files. So it's interesting. It was cool to see this side of Jim Butcher for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, if I read them side by side, not knowing, or at the same time, not knowing the author, I don't think I would have really connected the books. Like I would have recognized that it was the same author. Just they seem like different enough works to me.
Yeah. Okay. So one more thing that we kind of wanted to talk about before we jump into the spoiler section was to me, there's a lot of similarities to this and Wheel of Time. We talked to like before the podcast, we were talking about like there's a part where there's a character that kind of gets a collar put on them as a slave that seems very similar to a plot line in the Wheel of Time. There's just like cultures that feel very similar to each other. And we know like this book was written in 2004, which is when Wheel of Time like was pretty popular. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that Jim Butcher was influenced a lot by Wheel of Time? I don't think I've ever heard him talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how could any epic fantasy author not be influenced by Wheel of Time at this point? And pretty much all of those authors have read the book and read those books. If not, then
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I don't know
if you're
what
writing in
business they have.
fantasy, yeah, if you're writing in fantasy and not haven't read Wheel of Time, then yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So there are some things that we talked about. Maybe we'll get into them a little bit more in the spoiler section.
yeah.
That seemed very similar to things in the Wheel of Time, but I don't think it was similar enough that it was blatantly copying or anything. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think a lot like where it's hard not to copy Wheel of Time because Wheel of Time is such an expansive book series that it covers so many things. But it did take me out a little bit of the story when I got to those parts. I think especially well, we'll talk about it when we get to the spoiler section, but it was something that I think subtracted from the story for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear exactly what you're thinking.
Okay, well, we'll jump into spoilers now. So if you have not read the book,
let's give like
yeah.
a non-spoiler review just off the top of your head.
Oh yeah. Okay, so non-spoiler. This is kind of a classic epic fantasy tale where we get kind of two younger protagonists that each have exciting viewpoints. They end up merging together and going on adventure, like some adventures, and fighting a big evil at the end and largely succeeding. Well, that might be a bit of a spoiler, but kind of a high level point of view there. So I don't know what else would you add to kind of a high level overview.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty accurate. But what do you think? What do you think of the book?
Oh, what do I think about it? I would say, yeah. So if I was to give a rating, I would say probably a 7 out of 10. I tend to go for like a little bit lower on my ratings. I thought it was pretty creative, but I've seen pretty much everything that was done in the book done better elsewhere. And so to me, if I was like gonna refer, like if somebody came to me and was like, I'm looking for a book, that is enjoyable to read, that has like an immersive world, that has multiple points of view, there's like several books that I would recommend before this book. Now, if someone was like, I've already read Mistborn, I've already read like all these other books, then I'm like, oh, this is a, yeah, sure, you should read this book. It's a fun book by an author that I really like. So yeah, I would say 7 out of 10, just because there's frankly a lot of competition for this exact like segment that this book is in.
Yeah, I'd probably say something similar, maybe 7.5 out of 10. It's a good book. It's interesting. The concepts are interesting, like I mentioned earlier, with trying to bring together the Lost Roman Legion and Pokemon. And in this way, I certainly enjoyed it. There were some parts I just felt a little bit, um, maybe a little bit frustrated by. Just there were certainly some aspects of the story that I would say this fits well in YA, and then other aspects that I think fit more in adult fantasy. And maybe the disconnect caused me to enjoy it a little bit less than I did on my previous read through.
Yeah,
so
I could see that. Kind of like you're like, oh, this is like a pretty lighthearted book, and then bam, this like pretty intense thing happens, and then
yeah.
you're like, oh, that's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's similar for Dresden sometimes. You're like, oh, this is a pretty fun romp, and then like, oh, that made me cringe. So
Yeah.
yeah, Jim Butcher doesn't shy away from kind of the more graphic side of things sometimes. Okay, yeah. So I guess we recommend this book. Obviously, we normally only review things that we would recommend to people anyway. So if you are interested in this book, I would for sure recommend going and picking it up. There's 3 books, right? It's a trilogy, and it's all complete.
No,
Okay, this is
there's
embarrassing.
5.
Wait, what?
There's 6 books.
Seriously? Oh gosh, what have I
Yeah.
gotten myself into? But it's completed.
Yeah, it's completed. The last book was published in 2009.
Oh geez. Here we go. All right, so there's 6 books. Yeah, so maybe you're signing yourself up for a bit, but I will say this is one of those stories where you can read the first book and it's a complete book. You know what I mean? You're left knowing that characters are going to go on and do things, but there's also enough resolution of plot lines where you're not or like you don't feel the need to pick up the next book after it. So
looking at the release date for these books, it was 1 a year from 2004 to 2009.
Wow.
Which is impressive, because I'm thinking that he must have been writing and publishing around the same amount of Dresden File books, like once per year, or for the same time period. So I could be wrong, but thinking about this, he's writing 1 book in each series a year. That's impressive.
That is like, verging on Sanderson level of of publication. Yeah, and it's kind of weird because, well, not weird. I know that there's a long gap between that we had recently in between Dresden Files books, and I know that there was like valid reasons for that, but I just haven't been a fan of Jim Butcher in his heyday, where he's publishing a book a year. So that's really cool to learn that about him. I never really picked that up. So yeah. So yeah, recommend going and picking up this book. And yeah, if you don't want spoiled for you, then I would stop listening now. But before you stop listening, you should follow us on YouTube, or subscribe on YouTube. Fantology Books. You can find us on Patreon if you feel the need to lend your dollars to a good cause. You can also find us on Twitter.
You can no longer find us on OnlyFans.
No, Ryan has shut that side of our business down. He needs to get a real job now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also have a thriving Discord community with over 200 members at this point, and it's funny because every time we kind of start to cover a new series, we always get like a few really hardcore fans of that series. So all you hardcore fans of Furies of Codex Alera that captured yet through our reviews of Dresden, feel free to come onto our Discord and tell us everything that we get wrong throughout this review. Which I'm sure that you would probably already disagree with our 7 and 7.5 hot takes. So yeah. And I think you can find invites to that Discord on our Twitter. It's pretty easy. So okay. Yeah. So normally in this spoiler section, we kind of go kind of do a high level view of the plot points. We're gonna miss some things. We're gonna kind of skip over some things that might not have been super important. But we're just gonna kind of give our impressions on what happened, and yeah, that's kind of how we do this section. So
yeah, I think we're just gonna talk about the parts of the story that were interesting to us.
Yeah.
Or that we disliked, parts that we liked. And certainly other people have other parts of the book that were more interesting to them. That's just how it goes, So
yeah. And so yeah, I thought that the start of this book was very intriguing, where it kind of throws you into the deep end, so to speak, with Amara. Is it Amara? I've also Amara.
Yeah, Amara.
And she's a cursor, and I guess like you're kind of thrown in the middle of this. It's referred to as like a test, like she's graduating from something and she has to perform a test, which at first you're like, oh, it's a test. Like how high could the stakes be? But then you kind of gradually find out like, oh, Dean, these are like some high stakes. Like she's trying to infiltrate like this group of traitors, and if they're captured, then they'll probably be killed. And so you kind of are thrust into this high intensity situation. And yeah, so what did you think about that beginning? I thought it was pretty strong, and it definitely sucked me in.
Yeah, it was a good way. It was a good hook, right? It captured your attention. You immediately start to learn about the world. You're learning what's a cursor, what is she, and you learn about the magic with her flying and their furies, and so there's a lot that's put together in an interesting way. It's a good way to start showing rather than telling, right? You don't have this huge info dump right at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed that. One thing I thought, so we're also introduced to her mentor, whose name is Fidelius. And I thought, I can't remember if it's like right at the start. I think that there's like maybe a chapter in between or whatever, but you very quickly find out that he is a traitor. He betrays her. And that is a twist that I didn't feel was quite like deserved at that point. Like it didn't really hit me as strongly as it could if I was exposed to these characters longer. In fact, most of the kind of punch of that twist was felt later on, as you kind of as Amara like described more and more just how important Fidelius was in her life. So that is kind of like a critique I would have, is like, give us a bit more of interaction between these characters. Maybe this is like a halfway book twist where it's something that we really feel as an audience, because the classic mentor, old wise mentor betraying somebody is like a gut punch if done correctly. So that although I really liked the beginning, that was one of the weaker parts for me.
Yeah, I mean, I see your side of things where Butcher certainly could have developed their relationship together before he pulled the rug out from under us and revealed that Fidelius is a double agent working against the crown. And that could have been interesting. It's hard to see it because the structure of the plot is written in such a way that you almost immediately know that Fidelius is a spy and that Amara is injured running away, and that's how she runs into Tavi. She's injured, and so she's already on her back foot trying to get help. And so it's an interesting it's an interesting choice for him to certainly give that away so quickly. But
yeah, it definitely sets up like it would definitely be a reworking of the plot, you know.
mm-hmm,
I, and I would not presume to do that on the fly, certainly, but it was still like I had this like while I was listening, I was like, okay, cool, he's a trader, and I know that this is supposed to be a big thing, but it's just not for me right now. So
mm-hmm,
but I do agree that like if a mentor sticks along around for too long, that you it gets almost like a little boring. Either it gets boring because you never feel like the character's quite in danger, or you're like, why the heck isn't this mentor like stepping in and doing something? You know, you kind
yeah,
of that's kind of like how you feel like reading the first like few books of Harry Potter, right? You're like, why is Dumbledore letting this happen? You know, like why is
mm-hmm.
he like letting Harry like explore like the Chamber of Secrets, you know? So yeah, I definitely feel like it's important for a mentor to not be there as much, but I still think that like she could have still gotten separated from him and not known he was a traitor until he, you know, until like a key moment when he was supposed to do something. Or I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to rework the plot because, but it was still something that I think could have been handled better.
So you know who the relationship between Amara and Fidelius reminded me of?
uh,
Spoiler alert for Dresden Files, but it reminds me of the relationship between what's the Dresden and his apprentice Molly.
really? So
Like,
yeah,
well,
okay.
just in the fact that we learn later on in the story that Amara, it's like you can almost miss it where Amara is like, oh well, like I wanted to be more than just like
Yeah,
I wanted to be romantically involved with
yeah,
him.
she definitely
And
had. Yeah.
she's like young, I would imagine she's like just in her late teens, early 20s, and
Yeah,
he's like in his 50s or 60s, so there's like a significant age gap
that was one thing I
there.
was never super clear on her age because like the fact that she's just graduating from like this program or whatever like like automatically makes you think like okay, late teens, early 20s,
Hmm.
whatever. But then you're like, oh, maybe it's like this like super selective division of like the Navy SEALs or something, and she's secretly like late 20s, early 30s, or you know, like uh I was never super clear on her age. And plus the fact that she like develops a relationship with this like older guy, you know, oh, what's his name? Bernard. Yeah. You know, that
Bernard
relationship ended up, it's been years since I've read this, but the Fitz books, the
Fits in the Fool with
well, I don't
I,
want to, yeah, we
yeah,
don't want to spoil it, but you know what I'm saying. If you know, you
yeah.
know. Yeah, so Amara, yeah, kind of an interesting character throughout the book. We've kind of touched on a lot of her plot points, but we're trying to kind of may go through chronologically. So we'll circle back to her, I'm sure. Yeah. So what do you think of our introduction to Tavi? Where he kind of like we're introduced to him as he's like uh has feminine wiles used against him to the chagrin of his um kind of whoever he's apprenticing under. He loses the shepherd, the sheep that he's supposed to be keeping track of. It's kind of like we're kind of introduced to this character in like this funny way where we don't really take him too seriously.
Yeah, that's true. It's a little like whimsical. He's foregoing some of his responsibilities to try and impress a girl,
Yeah.
which ends up having some greater consequences than he thought would have later on with the flock of sheep or
Yeah.
um, running away, and then there's this storm coming in, right? And
Yeah.
they need to go get the sheep, and then they encounter this greater threat, the Marat,
Yeah.
that who are coming in. So all of this is I think pretty interesting, good setup for the world, and also gets us into the action pretty quickly.
Yeah, to me this is really good storytelling, right? Because nothing seems super forced. Like this is for sure like an interaction that could happen in like an everyday life, right? Like and it's fun to read about. So I really enjoyed that part of it. Like, you know, you kind of just randomly find yourself in like this very precarious situation. And it all started with like this one seemingly like innocent choice. So I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed how it introduced us to Bernard, as kind of like a very thoughtful um, mentor to Tavi, where he makes sure that he like impresses upon Tavi like the gravity of the situation, like, hey, this isn't okay, but at the same time is willing to forgive him and kind of help him correct it. So it is kind of a cool introduction to their relationship, and it really makes you like Bernard.
Yeah. He seems like a reasonable father figure, even though he's not his father.
Yeah, and that's something that's also interesting. Like we don't really know everything that's going on with Tavi. Like we know that he is an orphan, um, and we also know that for some reason he doesn't have these powers to call on the Furies like everybody else does. So that's an interesting part of his character. Although I think it's funny because it's interesting in a way that we're not used to, right? Like normally we're used to our viewpoint characters having powers that other people don't have. Um,
Hmm.
and in this case, that is kind of reversed. Another series that I think did this really well was the Lycanius books, right? Where our main character in that book also struggles to like master this very basic skill that everybody else seems to be able to. So
Yeah.
I really enjoy that maybe trope for of fantasy. So that's yeah,
Hmm.
I like that.
It seems like there are quite a few tropes in this book
Yeah,
that you can think of off the top of your head. Like he has his lineage is kind of unknown,
yeah.
and it, he sort of embarks on a greater journey. He's not. It just seems very similar to the hero's journey, right?
Yeah, I mean, classic. Like he's even a farm boy, you know, classic shepherd. You know, like there's really, yeah, it really is. You know, follows this kind of trope that we're used to.
Yeah, and I think we'll see some more of those tropes as the series goes on. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily. It's not a bad thing for a book to fall into tropes. I think there's good ways to use tropes and there's bad ways to use tropes, and
Yeah,
I think for the most part these are good.
yeah, I agree with that. Um, okay, so as we've kind of alluded to, as him and Bernard are kind of trying to uh find the sheep, they come across this threat of the Marat, and this is something I kind of had a harder time envisioning because it talked about like big birds, and I'm like, how much threat could a bird really be? But apparently like I just honestly like picture them like massive chickens almost. I don't know, like that was kind of odd to me, and like each of them was paired, but then I don't know. So yeah, that was kind of interesting, and they ended up killing this
I mean,
animal.
dinosaurs, a lot of dinosaurs are
Okay,
the
like a
ancestors of birds,
pterodactyl or
man.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't, they're like the way they were described to me in my head, they were just like these enormous, super tall birds that could just destroy you with their beak. I mean, they're hunting sheep, so
that's
they're
fair.
bigger than your run-of-the-mill
So they're like
bird.
dragons but not dragons almost. I
Maybe,
don't know,
yeah.
they're feathered dragons without the ability to blow fire. um
Also, did you get that? You probably didn't get this because you weren't as big a fan of Pokemon as I was. But the mountain is named Gyarados, which is the name of a Pokemon in the original generation.
okay, okay,
So,
there
small
you go.
reference to Pokemon.
That's really cool actually. um yeah, so in the course of taking on these two more they were both Marat, right? Like so
So the Marat guy is like kind of the handler or whatever.
Yeah.
He's the person who's bonded with these birds.
Hmm.
Um, they're, I think, his chala or totem, maybe. I think that's what the phrase they use in the book. Um, so yeah, there's the Marat, who's the person, and then the two birds. I think they're called herdbanes.
Okay. Yeah, and so Bernard ends up kind of dispatching them, but in the course is severely injured. And uh and they also get separated here, right? I'm forgetting, how does Bernard make it back to the homestead?
His fury is
Hmm.
takes him back,
Okay. And
and
he has the
Tavi
earth.
leaves.
Okay. And he has the earth fury, right? Bernard is.
Yeah, he
Okay.
has two furies. I think he has an earth fury named Brutus, and then he also has a wood a wood fury or forest, some other fury that gives him wood crafting that I forget its name.
Okay. And I guess like in the mid, like somewhere in here, I'm forgetting exactly where, but you're also introduced to Bernard's sister, who's at the homestead, and she is kind of quelling this village drama that's happening. It seems like it escalates really quickly. I can't really remember what the original conflict was, but you can tell that there's like a lot of tension in this village, um, and that is primarily the like caused from like kind of one family who is like the village bullies. I don't know. I guess you could say. Um, and so yeah, and so then Bernard makes it back, and he is healed by his sister. What's his sister's name again? Oh gosh,
Sana,
yeah. Wait, is it just Sana? Yeah,
Isana.
Isana. Yep. So Isana is like healing him, but she's also interfered with. So what did you think about like the whole like kind of village politics thing?
Um, I didn't really have too many thoughts on it.
Okay.
It's I think sort of a way that it introduces Asana as her own character and gives her something to do and proves that she, in her own right, is she is capable of holding her own, because she needs to sort of maneuver these holders who are feuding
Mhm.
in such a way that to prevent conflict from breaking out. And so she's capable of maneuvering people and uh, just being her own character, I guess. This
Yeah.
is sort of her introduction, us learning how competent she is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't know how necessary like Asana, because like Asana takes up a lot of oxygen in the story, right? Like especially with her kind of later plot line. So I don't know how necessary that was. I mean, I guess if you're setting this book up for like, you know, six books in the series, then sure. But yeah, I guess it was those were parts that I was like kind of wanted to just finish reading so I could make it back to like either Tavi or Amara. I don't know. Because they're like clearly painted to be like our, you know, heroines. So
Mm-hmm.
but I could see people also like really loving Asana because she kind of represents that like you know super strong matriarch feel that just like totally you know kicks butt. So yeah.
Yeah, so I finished the second book. I've reread it, and so Asana definitely appears in that one as well. And I think her story, especially her backstory, is important to uh, just the greater story of the world. And I, at least for me personally, she does become more interesting, more than just a story to fill space.
Okay, well that's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's definitely like we said from the beginning, there's a larger cast of characters, and so and whenever that's the case, there's going to be characters that you personally don't like enjoy reading about necessarily. Like I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people really struggle with certain viewpoints in Stormlight Archive, or like there's always going to be viewpoints where you're like, oh, just let's get this viewpoint over with. So, um, yeah, I guess it's good to hear that she kind of gets a second wind in the next book. Otherwise, I would have felt like, why do I need to learn about this character?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Okay, so what about when Tavi and Amara meet up? Because that's kind of like a point in the book that you've been waiting for, because these are both like young, likable characters. I thought that there would be a romance in there, but apparently Tavi has a thing for the older guys, and or sorry, Amara
Tavi,
has
yes.
Amara has a thing for the older guys, and Tavi ends up finding a love interest of his own. Um, but yeah, I thought it was fun when they met up, and like Amara's kind of acting like she's this runaway slave, and we know that she's like super capable and kind of on a mission to discover like save the kingdom almost, so it is very well done, I thought, in the fact that they're both hiding this information from each other, but also being very like vulnerable because they're in vulnerable situations together.
Hmm. Yeah, I could see maybe how you'd initially think that they would form some sort of romance interest, but Amara is, like we said, in her late teens, early 20s, whereas Tavi's he's like, I don't know, 14 or 15.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's a big difference
yeah, it is.
for those ages.
Yeah,
Um, Not to say that there couldn't be anything later on down the road as they get older. Um, but it was an interesting way to bring them together.
yeah. um but then very quickly, they started kind of making their way back to the homestead, and Bernard finds them after being healed by Asana, and uh this is one kind of tone change that I didn't really see. Well, okay, I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on it because it was something I didn't really understand. So Bernard was very harsh with uh Tali, right? Or Tavi, and so much so that it kind of broke character for him. And it was mentioned that sometimes when people are healed that were like that close to death, that like it changes them in like some fundamental way. And so I thought that that was the case with Bernard. Now, like later on in the book, it doesn't seem like that because but like in this case, he was just like so mean to Tavi, um and we're like the situation hadn't really changed at all, right? Like Tavi was just trying to get back and was doing the best he could. So I was
Hmm.
kind of thrown through a loop by that part, and that's kind of pedantic, but it was one thing that really stuck with me throughout the book.
Well, yeah, and Bernard, he lost his memory of the event.
Oh yeah,
So he
yeah,
doesn't necessarily know what happened. He just knows that he was very injured and that his sister almost died trying to save him. And so there were some very serious consequences to Tavi letting the herd or not bringing the herd in the night before. And so I think he was justifiably angry. And it wasn't like he was violently angry at Tavi. It was
right.
just like he was very like I think upset and frustrated at this situation. And Tavi was rightfully confused because he didn't realize initially that his uncle had forgotten. And so he was like, I thought we had like worked this
We
out.
worked this out,
So
right?
why are we bringing this back up?
It just kind of seems like maybe a cooler head. Like I feel like if you lost your memory of an event, that you would probably like try and like assume that things had been worked out instead of like going in that hot. I don't know. Obviously, it's a tricky situation. His sister almost died saving him. He's like almost like mortally injured. So yeah, I get it. It was just kind of interesting to see. And then this part of the book, it was just like thing after thing after thing was happening. So like we get back to the homestead. We kind of Bernard puts Amara, like helps her kind of get cleaned up. We start to see this romance develop a little bit. And then very quickly, Fidelius shows up at the homestead. So like, and it's interesting because typically like a homestead, it's like your safe place, right? You're like, okay, the characters made it back, like they're safe for now at least.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, that did not last very long, and they were just like, all right, let's Butcher was like, let's get this plot moving, because like they didn't even have a whole night, right, where it was like all of a sudden they're on the run again.
Yeah, they realized pretty quickly that those innocent travelers weren't so innocent, and that there was something that they were hiding, and it was related to Amara showing up, and then those people quickly realized that they knew who they were, and so it very rapidly set events in motion that caused our characters to be on the run again.
Yeah.
Very
So
little downtime.
very little downtime, right? And it's one of those things. Again, like when I was reading this, I had like recently sprained my ankle, and if I remember right, Amara had also sprained her ankle. I'm like, there's no way she could be doing this if it was that bad of a sprain. If it was like
Mm-hmm.
turning black and blue, I'm like, there's no way. But that's kind of plot armor for you. Um,
Was she healed at all by
I don't
Asana?
I don't think so because she still does like treat it pretty gingerly, but
Okay.
it's still like I don't know. There's only so far you can limp on a severely sprained ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so their party gets broken up. Miraculously, they like kind of all escape, but that doesn't last very long because like they all meet or they end up being thwarted by Cord, like the village idiot that we had referenced earlier, who is somehow in the perfect place to thwart their escape.
Yeah.
Um,
You're always just like, man, that guy again.
yeah, that guy, you're like, cool. But he very clearly uh asserts himself as a threat because like one of his kids ends up dying. And so he's pretty ticked off. He ends up I think one of his kids right like sets like the forest on fire or something, so everything's kind of pretty chaotic. And Bernard and Amara end up escaping, but Asana and Odiana, who was Fidelius's traveling companion, they end up being captured by Cord.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you think about this whole plot line? This is where when Odiana and Asana are taken prisoner, Odiana has like a slave collar put on, and this is where I'm like, this is like just straight lifted from Wheel of Time with the
Yeah.
collar that
With
Isodel can
the
have
with
put on
that,
them.
yeah, to control them.
Yeah,
Yeah, it certainly, I remember thinking something like this is a lot like the Wheel of Time, and the collaring of the Aes Sedai. And this is also where I remember reading this and thinking this book is a lot more adult than I remember it, because of the implications on what Odiana had done to her and what they
mm,
were doing to her now, and
yeah,
what they were going to do to Asana. It was a very adult moment, a little bit. Uh,
yeah, yeah, for
some
sure.
something that I didn't remember reading beforehand.
Yeah, that's a
And
big trigger warning there. Like, rape is discussed in pretty explicit detail, and that's something that like Wheel of Time doesn't really do, right? Like Wheel of Time, it's like they're kind of tortured through menial tasks, or maybe, but it's never like rape is explicitly talked about, right? So that it's kind of different.
yeah, I don't remember exactly. It's been a while since I've read Wheel of Time, so I couldn't say um how how into detail they go, but I think you're right.
Yeah, from what I remember, it was like almost like if they tried disobeying an order, then it was almost like the Cruciato curse or whatever from Harry Potter. Like they just like felt like unbearable pain. But like most of the
Mhm.
time their orders were just like do this, do that. And maybe like they're used to fight and stuff, but like it's never like as
Mhm.
sexually explicit as this. And especially I agree with you when you learn about like Odiana's backstory, it does kind of explain why she is the way she is. Um, it doesn't make it any more pleasant to read about. And again, I thought it was one of the plot lines that could have been written out of the book and the book wouldn't have really suffered. Um, but maybe at that point, I'm glad it's in there because it does add a different dimension. So
Yeah. And it brings together two very different people. It brings
yeah.
together Isana and Odiana, who
Mhm.
are each on opposite sides of the conflict, but they come together with a common enemy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And Odiana does serve to give some plot armor to our characters near the end of the book. So
mhm,
that's good to kind of have this deeper relationship with her.
yeah, Asana saves Odiana's life, so Odiana saves Bernard's life later on.
Yeah. So I'm a fan of that. And this is um you're kind of getting to, like, at this point in the book, you're kind of getting a sense that, like, okay, things are kind of heating up a little bit, like things are really moving now. But also like when this is happening, Tavi has been off having his own adventure,
Hmm.
because he's been captured by the Murat uh,
Marat.
Murat. Um, and we learn that there's like different tribes, and he has to do a task, right, where he and somebody else have to try and like retrieve something and make it back alive. So what did you think about this whole plot point?
I thought it was a fun little twist where Tavi thinks that she is a boy the whole time, and because her dad just calls her his whelp,
Yeah.
and so the whole time he's thinking that she's a boy, and she is a lot less likable, more kind of like a nemesis to him and his goals. And then he realizes that she's a girl, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, we should work together."
Well, to be fair, he was giving, even when he thought that she was a boy, he was like kind of giving her the benefit of the doubt. Like, I mean, she tried to like kill him or maybe like seriously maim him when he was climbing down the rope, and she just starts cutting him.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
that's pretty
true.
messed up.
Hmm.
And uh, and then he's willing to forgive her then, and like, so he does get he gives her he like definitely treats her like a nemesis, but he definitely gives her the benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this whole like sequence was just like, it was like another one like where there's so much going on in this book, like I just want to spend a lot more time in this like mysterious like uh place that they've gone to, where there's like wax spiders apparently, and like all these like very intriguing, like deeply magical parts of the world, that I just wanted to spend more time in.
Yeah, this was certainly this was a fun part of the book. Um, as well as like learning more about the Marat, we're also learning more about this mysterious wax forest. The thing that I didn't like about this part was they're very careful to sneak in to get the I forget the mushroom or the plant, whatever they need.
Right, some magical healing thing that
Hmm.
is, yeah. Mhm.
And then like they're trying to sneak past these keepers, and then they get it, and then they just like run out. I guess Tavi runs out at full speed, sets everything on fire.
Yeah,
I'm
especially the freaking tree on fire. Yeah.
like, couldn't you have just like run in there and grabbed it and then run out? Like, did you need to sneak in there? If you could have just, I don't know, maybe it seemed a little
Forced.
okay. All right, Cat. Yeah, I don't know. Well, it just seemed a little easy for them to get out. I guess it wasn't too easy because
I mean,
Katai
she
got
almost
ended.
dies, and he has to like, I thought it was really well done. It was very cinematic. But yeah, I agree. It felt like it was resolved pretty quickly. Um, but it was cool to learn like that her dad had kind of like counted on them tying so that they could find like this
Yeah.
weird loophole, and he could like take control of the armies through that somehow. Uh I don't know, that whole politicking kind of did feel forced to me, because I'm like, I know nothing about, like, I'm just accepting that this is like going to be a thing, and I
Yeah.
have no reason why I should be accepting that, but whatever. You know what I mean? Like that kind of all felt forced.
Yeah, it's one thing for the author to write like all these political ins and outs, and then the reader kind of puts things together and is like, oh, well, what if this happens?
Yeah.
But for this, it was like Tavi's like, oh man, what if we tie? And she's like, oh, maybe that's what my dad
Yeah,
wanted us to do this whole time, is he wanted us to tie. And so we all win that way. I'm like, this seems like a little convenient, you know?
yeah, yeah. And it's like if her dad wanted that to happen, he could have just like whispered it in her ear before they're like
Yeah.
risking their life. Yeah. Anyway, it is what it is. There's some things, and this is again why it might borderline on YA, because it's like there's you're not super into like the political machinations, but like just enough so that like you feel like you should be. So it kind of rides on line, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but it does set it up well for like Tavi to like. So I guess in conjunction with this, our other heroes have kind of found themselves in a weird spot because they're all kind of holed up in this castle that is currently being attacked. Um, and there's really no hope, even though like the uh the the town folk have like succeeded in like raising the wall by a certain number of feet so that like it made them safer, but you still get the sense that the situation is pretty dire. um and then here comes Tavi with his like newly acquired army because he completed this uh, some task, you know. I thought
Hmm.
it was cool, but it was still kind of lacking for me.
Yeah, it didn't feel as hard as I thought it was going to be. It like everything came together in the end, and I I, I don't know. The sense of danger was quickly eliminated
Right.
in a
And
way, in a YA type of way.
yeah, it was definitely like here's, I don't know, yeah. What do you think about like the duel between the two like captains of the Murat? Like because didn't Tavi like help him like say watch out or something like as soon as he was like as soon as
Well, there was another one of the other chieftains when he realized that like the enemy chief, I forget his name, when he was gonna lose, he like took out a poisoned bow or something and was
Mhm.
gonna shoot Daroga. And Tavi was like, "Watch out!" and he warned him. And so I think once they realized that they were gonna cheat to win, if they couldn't win, then all bets were off and everybody just started fighting everybody.
Yeah, so I thought that was cool, but again, you're giving Tavi like a lot of credit for like doing what literally anybody would have done in that situation.
Hmm.
um so yeah, so again, like so one thing I will say about this kind of battle scene after everybody shows up, it was really crazy to see uh Fidelius fighting, and there's also like a few characters we haven't even mentioned yet, like that Fidelius, his companion, who's like the sword master.
Aldrich
um
ex Gladius.
yeah, so he's like freaking like taking our characters out left and right, and then here comes uh like um Tavi's traveling companion, who's kind of like Corridor, that like he clearly has like
Or
some type of mental thing going, like
yeah,
maybe a little bit,
Fade.
yeah, developmentally like not all there.
That was another slightly cheesy part of the book where like Aldrich ex Gladius, the whole time he's like every other sword fight, he's like, the only person who's been able to do that before is Araris Valerian, but you're not Araris Valerian. And then at the
Yeah,
end of the book, it's like, oh well, here is Araris Valerian back from the dead to fight you.
yeah, and you're like, how did he arrive there? Like, what? I mean, has he just been acting kind of slow the whole time?
And
Or does
and
he is he just kind of triggered by like action, like he can kind of snap out of it briefly?
ouch, my cat just clawed me. Um, yeah, I think that's those questions will be answered in later books.
And then it was kind of cheesy where he like he you think he's gonna lose, but he's like actually been like carving out like this ground so that that his enemy will like fall to his death
Yeah,
or something. That was interesting. um
I actually like that part. I
I
don't know
mean,
why.
yeah, very cinematic, but like again bordering on like the YA, right, where you're like, okay, that was like just so over the top.
Hmm.
um but yeah, in the midst of this battle, we think that Bernard has died. We're pretty sure the Fidelius has died, right? Because d- didn't Tavi stab him in the back, or who? Somebody stabbed him, right? Um, so yeah, you think like all these, and it kind of, it ends up that like Odiana kind of goes around and saves everybody that you think had died.
Hmm.
So did any of our main characters actually die?
No, not really. The only
Yeah.
people that died were the soldiers on the battlefield and the chieftain of the Herdbane clan.
Yeah. And who the evil guy from the village, um
Cord.
Cord, yeah, he gets his comeuppance.
Yeah. Yeah,
um
he does, definitely.
so that was good to see. um yeah, so I and then here's where it got a little cheesy for me, right? Where it's like uh so battle's over, it's like the next morning or whatever, and suddenly Tavi is like uh getting like high praises from the king, and is like, you saved us, and you're like, okay, rightfully so. And he's like, what's your one request, if you could request anything? And Tavi's like, I want to go learn at the school, and
Hmm.
you're like, really? Like, you haven't had like a perspective change throughout all this? Like, that's still your ambition, it's almost like normally characters start out at the school and then realize that like there's life outside of the school that they should be
Yeah.
participating in. I don't know, so that was kind of funny to me.
My big gripe with this story that I don't remember through the first time reading is that Tavi is so much of a goody two shoes where he just always does the right thing at the right time, and
He's not even like a
he's
Mary Sue, because it's not even like he's that competent, right?
yeah.
But I agree. It's like it's not even, he's not that strong or overpowered or anything, but he's just always like so earnestly trying to do the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just, it's kind of annoying because he like doesn't really have any flaws other than the fact that he can't fury craft.
Yeah.
Because other than that, he's like very intelligent, witty. He's like outwitting adults and
Uh-huh.
just doing things that don't seem super realistic for somebody at that age. Once again, this is fantasy, so not that this has to be 100% realistic, but I was thinking to myself like, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And um so I don't know. And Tavi's just like, oh, I would you please just help out all of the people who were displaced from,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
help them with their finances.
Yeah.
It's
Too
like,
much of a Boy Scout for sure.
yeah,
Um,
I'm like, ask for some training to learn how to fury craft or some
yeah.
sick suit of armor. I don't know.
Now, it is interesting because there's a few comments made throughout the book that like gave a very like chosen one vibe to Tavi. And they're kind of throwaway comments in it. They weren't throwaway. They're like foreshadowing comments where I don't really know what they mean, but I am intrigued. Like, that is one thing that is intriguing me. Like, what about him is so interesting to Bernard and Asana, that they are like think that he's super important for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And
Because he's their special baby.
yeah, so I don't know, it is intriguing. There's definitely a strong direction that like I said, some pros of this book is that it developed a strong cast of characters to like last throughout the series. Sometimes like at the end of a book you're like, well, we followed our three people throughout, and now where is this going to go? But like this book, you're like, okay, I know like Tavi's going to the school, like, you kind of know where each character is going to what they're going to be doing. And so that is, while at the same time having like this pretty big resolution, right? So I was a fan of the ending in that respect.
Yeah, I like the world building a lot with like I mentioned, the Furies. I like the Marat. They remind me a lot of the blue people from Avatar,
Yeah.
the world of Pandora.
Or the
Um,
Aiel from Wheel of Time, which is like another glaring
yeah.
similarity that we haven't discussed before.
hmm I like the way that they have like different clans have these different animals that they bond, and it's interesting how Tavi and Katai somehow became bonded. So we'll see what that holds in the future. So
Yeah.
I did definitely like the story. I think I feel like I talked more at the end about things I didn't like. Um, but I do want to say that I do like this story. I like the world. I like the magic system, how it is similar to Pokemon with these Furies that manifest um, and so yeah, I think those are some of my high points from it.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we have just enough time to do a worst of the best. I'll go first, so if you don't have one, then you can use this time to think about it. This is something I think I've mentioned, but it was I really enjoyed that final battle where the stakes felt like they were super high. It felt like our some of the main characters that we've been with the whole book were kind of getting picked off. I thought that Fidelius was going to be a goner. I thought Bernard was going to be a goner. And so that was a highlight. And then it seemed like all of that was undone. Um, and I wish that, uh, it's not that I wish that Bernard had died because I really like Bernard, but like it takes guts to kill off characters in books. And I feel like if that had been done, then it would have gained a couple, like it would have probably gone up to a 7.5 or an 8 had that happened, honestly, because it just then the stakes seem real.
hmm Yeah, there was some pretty strong plot armor around all of the important people.
And at least it made sense in world, like I did like the foreshadowing, like you had mentioned, or not the foreshadowing, but like the reason, like, okay, Asana saved Odiana, so Odiana is repaying the favor. It makes sense, but like either Odiana is way OP because she can just like save anybody, or like I don't know, or like I just don't think she would be like realistically using that ability to like save the people that she's been fighting against. But
hmm
anyway, that is my worst of the best.
I think my worst of the best is I want to say the scene with the dagger, the Aquitaine dagger that
Oh,
everybody's fighting over
yeah,
because of the implication that, well, if we have this, then we have proof that it's House Aquitaine,
right.
and um, and then what ends up happening is much to the good guys, their misfortune, they lose track of this dagger and it ends up back in Fidelius. And I did really like this because it prevents it prevents them from acting openly against these bad characters, but at the same time, I didn't like it because it prevents them from acting openly against these bad guys. You're like,
Yeah,
man, these guys, they literally just like assaulted the they literally assaulted the empire or got the Marat to do it, but because of politics, we can't do anything about it.
yeah, I agree. And plus, it's hard to follow. Like that whole logic was just like hard to follow.
hmm
Um, and it's another example of like these political things happening that have a lot of impact in the world, and us as readers just kind of accepting it at face value. And like, so anyway, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good worst of the best. Okay, any parting thoughts?
No, I think that if you do like Dresden Files, that you will
Yeah.
probably like these books as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, if you like Dresden Files just because you're a big fan of the urban fantasy genre, then you might not like these books. But if you like Dresden Files because you're a fan of Jim Butcher and his ability to tell a compelling story and paint, realistic characters that you can really have fun reading about, yeah, you'll for sure like this book.
I mean, I give it a 7.5 out of 10, so it's by no means a perfect book, but it's enjoyable, and it does show off the versatility of Jim Butcher, how he improves as an author. And he also, I mean, not recently, I think it was back in like 2016 or so, but he started a steampunk series, which I haven't started. He only has one book out in the series, and I haven't heard anything about the next book, but I'm interested to see where that goes, because it seems like Jim Butcher only gets better as time goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll just play our channel one more time. Go ahead and find us on Discord. Join the conversation there. Tell us about the fact that we missed a few plot points, like the fact that we didn't even talk about the dagger until the very final worst of the best segment. As well as recommend other books, have some books recommended to you. We have some people on Discord that have just read so many books, and they're always willing to give recommendations out. So yeah, find us on Discord and sub us on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2021, and we're at 870 or something right now, so any little bit counts. And yeah, I guess we are finishing up our sexiest villains poll right now on Twitter, our bracket on Twitter. We have not decided what that'll probably be done by the time you're listening to this, but we have not decided what the next bracket is going to be. But we do monthly brackets, and the winner does get some Fantology swag. So if you're interested in participating in that, then follow us on Twitter, and we'll for sure be promoting next month's bracket. Okay, well, thanks for jumping on, Ryan. I'm sure we'll probably, I'm wanting to continue reading this. I know you said you've already finished your reread of the second book, so I'll catch up to you. There's a lot of the final book in the first law trilogy or world is coming out next month, so that's something that we're going to be reading. We're reading Foundation before that comes out on Apple TV Plus. So there's kind of a lot of things on our docket right now, but we'll for sure get around to the series when we have some free time.
Are you all caught up in the first law world?
I have one more book. I've read there's the final trilogy, right? Like after all the standalones, and I've read the first book in that trilogy, so I know read the next.
So book. You read a Little Hatred?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I haven't read Sharp Ends, which is a bunch of short stories.
Okay.
But I've read everything else. So
okay,
I'm excited. I wanted, one of the reasons I haven't read that second book in the final trilogy is because I wanted to read it right before this next book came out, because it's like when you read Joe Abercrombie, it's very hard to read other authors because he has such a compelling voice, and I find that I really need to kind of sink deep into his writing, and so I wanted to kind of group those books together as much as possible.
Okay,
so,
cool.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
All right, see you later.
See you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Fantology. If you'd like to let us know your opinions on all things sci-fi and fantasy, join our Discord. Invites are in the episode descriptions below. If you'd like to support the show, like these fine folks here, you can do that at patreon.com/Fantology_books. Patrons get early access to new episodes, exclusive postings, and exclusive Discord benefits. But of course, just listening and watching and sharing with your friends and family is support enough. Journey before destination all.